Be my eyes in the Infrastructure Oversight Committee, he said, leaning back like he already owned the 37th floor. Or your keycard stops working by Monday. That was the moment Brent Aldridge freshly installed as VP of Global Operations, and the CEO's nephew revealed exactly who he was, entitlement wrapped in a tailored suit. No discussion, no courtesy, just a demand. I'm Marissa Keaton, 54 Senior Operations Strategist at Crestwell Dynamics in Chicago. I've been here since 2010, long before we expanded to Asia, long before our name landed in Business Weekly's Top 50 Innovators. I've managed product launches in 4 languages, trained every incoming ops team since 2015, and once salvaged a Hong Kong rollout with 45 seconds to spare. Brent hadn't built anything. He was slotted into power like a decorative plate on a shelf, shiny but hollow. He didn't want my insight. He wanted control, insider details on votes, budgets, and doubts, so he could rewrite decisions before the board saw them. "I'm giving you a chance," he smirked. "Don't waste it." I stood left without a word and returned to my own office. I locked the door, drew the blinds, and inserted a black flash drive into my workstation. A single folder appeared: Atlas Protocol. Brent thought I was another line on payroll. He had no idea my name was on a contract that could remove him entirely. 14 months earlier, during a leadership shuffle, I was quietly cut from a project I built from scratch. No explanation, just an HR email and a new lead with the right last name. A year ago, I was shortlisted for Senior VP of Strategic Integration after leading our cross-border compliance rebuild, averting 2 near-regulatory disasters, and fixing our North America onboarding after a vendor collapse. I never got the interview. Brent, with 2 years in consulting and 3 months shadowing executives, got the role instead. Officially, the board cited my limited C-suite presentation experience. Unofficially, I overheard the CEO telling another exec Marissa's great, but Brent understands the family brand. As if Crestwell's reputation came through bloodlines instead of decades of work. What no one in that boardroom knew was that 8 months before Brent's promotion, a discreet legal advisor had approached me on behalf of a strategic shareholder holding 18% of Class B voting stock. They wanted an independent insider, someone loyal to merit, not family ties. Under the codename Proxy Unit 6, I signed a binding agreement granting me veto authority, the right to freeze proposals and initiate internal reviews in cases of misconduct or fiduciary abuse. I never used it. Not when Brent took my position. Not when my work went uncredited. I waited. Because real power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly at the edge of the table until the moment it's ready to move. When Brent cornered me last week, he thought he was asserting dominance. What he didn't realize was this: I don't work for him. I work for the part of Crestwell Dynamics that still values fairness, competence, and earned trust. I don't wear a crown. I don't carry a last name that unlocks boardroom doors. What I carry is leverage, and the memory of every time I was overlooked, told I was almost there, or watched someone else take the stage while I held the line. That's what Brent doesn't know, and that's what will end him. The room broke into applause. My hands stayed still. I watched Brent Aldridge bask in the spotlight, presenting a plan I'd spent 6 months building: an expansion pipeline for 3 new regions, complete with phased budgets, stakeholder strategies, and my custom risk forecasting model. Only my name wasn't there. The same color palette I'd chosen on a red-eye from Tokyo was still intact, but now the title slide read, Strategic Renewal, Proposal by Brent Aldridge. 2 weeks earlier, I'd saved the unfinished draft in my private server folder. Tone, still rough numbers awaiting finance review. And yet, there it was on the big screen, word for word, bullet for bullet. I didn't speak up. Not in front of the CEO, not in front of the board. I'd learned my lesson the last time I challenged credit theft and got labeled too sensitive about recognition. So I sat there smiling politely, watching him wrap himself in my work. My mind drifted not away but back to every time someone else's voice got the praise while I quietly fixed their numbers. When the meeting ended and the room emptied, I stayed behind. From my bag, I pulled my printed draft, the one with my name in the corner. Someone had drawn a red line through it. I didn't remember doing that. Later that night at home, I opened the company server. Brent's file showed his name on the upload, but the metadata told the truth. Author Marissa Keaton. Last edited by Brent Aldridge. It wasn't just theft. It was arrogance, the belief no one would check. I took screenshots, logged the time, and created a secure archive. My Atlas protocol folder had clear stipulations, documented misconduct triggered my proxy authority. Brent had just handed me cause. Then I noticed a lag in my encrypted files, a flicker in my keystrokes. Brent had installed spyware on my laptop disguised as a resource tool. Amateur code, sloppy naming. It scraped keystrokes, monitored logs, and took screenshots. I didn't remove it. Instead, I redirected its output to an off-site server controlled by my strategic shareholder allies. Every keystroke he thought he was stealing was now evidence, time-stamped and in the right hands. He'd taken my work. Now I was taking back the boardroom. Brent didn't even bother disguising the process name. The worst part wasn't that he tried to spy on me, it was that he assumed I wouldn't be sharp enough to notice, that I'd stumble into his net like some green technician without teeth. But I don't walk into traps. I build them. And sometimes I flip them inside out. I didn't delete the spyware. That would have tipped my hand. Instead, with 3 lines of code and a private server key, I redirected its output to a secure off-site server controlled by the strategic shareholder group that had entrusted me with Atlas protocol oversight. If you believe power is best served quiet but decisive, hit subscribe, because the next chapter of this story will show what happens when the quiet strategist finally takes the driver's seat. Every keystroke Brent thought he was stealing was now being reviewed, time-stamped, and archived by people with far more power than he could imagine. And that was only step 1. Once the tunnel was in place, I embedded a listener script that mirrored his queries. Every time he accessed my machine, I saw it too, not just what he took, but when, from where, and under which IP address. That's when I found the recording. It was buried in a mislabeled directory disguised as a vendor debrief. The audio told another story, Brent speaking to an outside consulting firm I recognized. They'd been lobbying for access to our South American operations for years. He wasn't discussing strategy. He was mapping a takeover, cutting dead weight, flipping old leadership, replacing seasoned staff with cheaper, scalable hires. Legacy staff. That's what he called the people who built Crestwell through recessions and acquisitions. People like Ron in compliance who still showed up at 6:00 a.m. Or Gloria in logistics who hadn't taken a real vacation in a decade. People like me. This wasn't just crossing a line, it was detonating it. And under the shareholder agreement I'd signed, this was cause internal manipulation, pre-coordination, with third parties restructuring without board review. Violations stacked high. But I didn't act yet. Focused retaliation doesn't look like revenge, it looks like preparation. Controlled leverage. Strategic silence. So I saved the audio, backed up the logs, and tagged the file Exhibit A. Then I went back to work, answering emails, reviewing quarterly risk metrics, smiling through briefings, jotting notes in team reviews. I gave Brent exactly what he wanted, a version of me that looked unaware. While he was listening for leaks, I was loading ammunition. He didn't know the rules. I did. And now I had proof not just of spying, but of a quiet war in motion. I intended to end it before he ever fired a shot. That night, at Crestwell's quarterly mixer, the jazz was too loud, the lights too soft, and the laughter too hollow. Brent stood at the center of it all, champagne in hand, high-fiving interns like he'd built the product launch. I stood at the edge of the room, Merlot untouched, not because I didn't want it, but because I couldn't risk losing control of even one breath. That's the thing about this kind of silence. It doesn't shout. It sits heavy familiar. For someone like me who didn't get here through the right last name or a family dinner invite, silence is an old companion. It wraps around your spine and whispers, "You still don't belong." The air was thick with praise. Brent Aldridge had streamlined regional planning, revitalized cross-functional proposals, and brought fresh energy to strategy. At least that's how they told it. No one mentioned the team behind the launch. No one mentioned me. Marissa, a quiet voice, came from my side. It was Tyler, a junior systems analyst I'd mentored before restructuring moved him under Brent's org. "I still remember when you stayed late to help me fix that data cascade in 21, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Everyone else left. You didn't. You saved my job." I tried to smile. "That was a rough night," I said softly. "You deserve better," he replied. "So do you." He gave my shoulder a squeeze before disappearing back into the safety of the crowd. I turned toward the window, letting the Chicago skyline blur into streaks of light. My name hadn't been in Brent's speech, the weekly brief, or the board prep deck I'd authored. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I slipped my phone from my clutch, opened the encrypted Atlas protocol channel. We rarely spoke, just quiet signals and codes, but this moment needed no subtlety. It's happening again. A beat. Then, legacy purge plan initiated. I hit send. The silence felt less like absence and more like pressure, controlled, directed. Brent could play the room rewrite credit and drown us in performance theater. But he couldn't erase what was already moving beneath the surface. I wasn't just watching. I was documenting. For every compliment he stole, I had a matching log time-stamped archived. This wasn't about my credit anymore. It was about the people he called legacy weight behind closed doors. I glanced at my reflection in the wine glass. Lips tight, eyes steady. He had no idea his silence was about to become evidence. I knew his weakness. He couldn't resist the scent of a scandal if he thought he could control it. So I gave him one. I drafted a report under an internal compliance header, network security review, unverified access pathways, in expansion frameworks. Technical enough to bore most executives, urgent enough to tempt someone insecure. I outlined a hypothetical vulnerability allowing third-party vendors to bypass encryption. Real logs, believable examples, and a few telling graphs. Buried deep in the XML metadata, I hid my signature trace code, a digital fingerprint I'd developed 2 years ago. No one else knew it existed. I saved the bait to a shared drive misfiled under draft redundant archival. Then I waited. It didn't take long. By noon the next day, the bait document had been opened, but not by me. My code tracker pinged once. Then again. It had moved from my archival folder to an unclassified desktop, and then to an external distribution list Brent Aldridge controlled. By the end of the week, he had repurposed the report as a weapon. He presented it to 3 VPs as evidence of a serious oversight by a senior product analyst. The unspoken target was Claire, one of our rising engineers who had recently challenged Brent's preferred vendor list. Claire was blindsided. So was her team. A quiet investigation began, just enough to shake confidence, never enough to make noise. Brent, meanwhile, looked like the vigilant leader catching flaws before disaster. What he didn't know was that every forwarded copy carried my invisible tracer. Each open triggered a silent notification to 3 senior directors I trusted, plus the shareholder proxy council. They saw my original. They saw his version. They saw the chain of custody, who opened it, who sent it, and who scrubbed the metadata to erase file history. I didn't need to accuse him. The file was doing it for me. When HR reached out for clarification, I answered calmly with time-stamped backups and a clearly archived draft showing no formal submission. No name, no reference, just a document that had been left out. I didn't look directly at Brent afterward. Didn't smirk. Didn't gloat. I let him sit in what he thought was a win. Because real strategy isn't about speed, it's about structure. And the floor beneath him was cracking one breadcrumb at a time. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the windows. My peppermint tea had gone cold hours earlier. Across the room hung a photo from Crestwell's original integration team, taken after we passed $100 million in recurring revenue. I was 29, exhausted and smiling. Of the 12 people in that picture, only 3 of us were still here. Now we were being erased softly, strategically, under Brent's modernization initiative. I turned back to my screen and opened the Atlas Protocol folder I hadn't touched in nearly a year. 3 files: the contract, the activation key, and a single-page list of clause triggers I'd been watching like a surgeon waiting for vitals to fail. The moment had arrived. I opened the contract. In the event of restructuring, retaliation against legacy staff, or unethical data manipulation, compromising strategic integrity, the appointed proxy is authorized to activate full Class B voting rights. I didn't read the rest. I had it memorized. On my desk sat Brent's latest document, his name at the top, his signature at the bottom. It was phase 1 of a plan to gut the company's memory, replace it with brand polish, and fill the gaps with loyalty hires. 6 lines into the summary, I saw it: the exact trigger clause from my agreement. Non-scalable legacy functions will be sunset to ensure operational agility moving forward. The exact trigger. The exact wording from the clause buried in my Atlas Protocol agreement 11 months ago. Brent Aldridge, in his arrogance, had unknowingly given me the legal grounds to override him completely. I hit print. The machine hummed, the sound almost ceremonial. The page slid out, warm edges trembling like they knew the shift underway. Authorized proxy Marissa Keaton. I stared at my name, not with pride, not with emotion, but with finality. It was time. At my desk, I opened the secure comms portal I'd been given when all this began. 6 letters: react. A notification pinged instantly. Proxy activation confirmed. Class B voting rights transferred to Marissa Keaton, effective immediately. Authorization to suspend or override internal proposals granted. No alarms, no flashing screens. Just a line of legal text that quietly shifted the balance of power. The war was no longer hypothetical. It had begun quietly, officially. I poured out the cold tea, my hands steady. Outside, Chicago kept moving, unaware that a corporation's future had just pivoted on a clause no one else had bothered to read. Brent would wake tomorrow thinking the plan was still his, but he'd already triggered the clause that dismantled it. He built a pitch deck. I built a case file. Now we'd see which could survive impact. The email came at 8:24 a.m. Subject: internal compliance review. Temporary leave with pay. No greeting, no explanation. Just one sentence. Effective immediately. Please clear your workstation and log out of all company systems while we conduct an internal inquiry. They moved fast, less than 48 hours after I activated proxy authority. Brent had already fired his counterstrike. I expected resistance, but not this quickly. He must have sensed a shift, maybe a hesitant board nod, a rumor, or the look I gave when I didn't flinch during his optimization speech. Whatever it was, he wasn't taking chances. I packed in silence. No one helped. A few peeked around cubicle corners, then ducked away. The hallway that once felt like home now echoed with retreat. I didn't slam drawers or leave notes. I carried one box, and in my head the names of people who'd trusted me. Now they were watching from behind screens, whispering, "She's done." By 10:30, company chats were on fire. I wasn't in them anymore, but people talk HR's cleaning house. Brent says she leaked internal reports. False victories feel real for a while, especially when no one fights back. I went home, didn't open my laptop. I cleaned, folded laundry, confirmed I'd be at my niece's recital. Silence isn't surrender, it's where strategy lives. At 4:02 p.m., the next move came. Not from me. A plain brown envelope arrived at HR's desk. Inside a flash drive, a printed stack of logs. Inside the envelope was a typed note: requested review material. Full compliance trace. By 6:30 p.m., It was in the hands of legal. The flash drive contained a complete record of Brent Aldridge's unauthorized data access traced directly to his own IP. Screen captures of his edits to the planted vulnerability report. Audio clips where he called veteran staff dead weight and openly discussed clearing out old names. The most damning detail, all of it had been logged using the spyware he insisted I install his own tool, his own commands, his own mistake. I hadn't sent it. Someone else had. At 7:15, a message appeared on my encrypted Atlas protocol line. No name, no signature. Your silence gave the system time. We did the rest. I didn't need to ask who. The shareholder group had eyes everywhere, subtle, quiet, deliberate. Brent thought he was watching me. He never realized we were watching him. The next morning, HR issued a neutral update I was on indefinite administrative review, pending a full audit of Brent's modernization initiative. My name wasn't said, my situation never acknowledged, but everyone felt the tremor. That night, riding the elevator with nothing but a grocery bag, I caught my reflection. No badge, no blazer, just a steady-eyed woman who knew the system was still listening and now it was speaking. Back in my apartment, my desk, usually a grid of neatly stacked briefs and maps, looked like a war room, notes scattered. A cold coffee beside a pile of evidence charts, transcripts, screenshots. Everything Brent had touched. Despite the mountain of proof, I felt alone. Not afraid, not powerless, just alone. Since I'd activated proxy authority, no one had spoken my name aloud. Inside the company, I was a rumor wrapped in silence. Outside, just another name in an internal review file. The indictment I was building wasn't legal yet. But it was thorough, every violation labeled, every act of coercion logged, every unethical edit documented. Every so often, I'd stop typing and listen to the refrigerator hum, the faint traffic below the weight of isolation. This wasn't punishment, it was strategy. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. No voicemail. I let it buzz twice before answering. Marissa. The voice was older now, slower but familiar. Elaine MacArthur, North America Strategy Director. One of the last senior executives from the old Crestwell Guard. Years ago, she'd greenlit the Asia-Pacific model I designed. She hadn't spoken to me since Brent's rise until now. I've seen what he's doing, she said, low and steady. You're not crazy, and you're not wrong. After a pause, if you're the one holding the rope, pull it. He's killing this company. The line went dead. I didn't need thanks. That was more than support, it was permission. And it was all I needed. I compiled voice transcripts, IP logs, and email trails, every thread tied to Brent Aldridge's misconduct. I backed it with my proxy rights and cited the relevant sections of company code. It wasn't a plea, it was a reckoning. When the file was complete, I encrypted it and sent it through official Atlas protocol channels to the full strategic board. Subject line, formal motion to suspend strategic leadership evidence enclosed. I expected that to be the hardest part, but 3 hours later something else arrived through my burner backup channel. No name, no greeting, just a file attachment and a short note I couldn't keep watching. He's worse than you think. Inside was a private group chat log between Brent and 3 senior aides. The language chilled me. Legacy teams are dragging us. Reset entirely. Push them out quietly. Use productivity audits. Frame it as culture misalignment. On the list, Claire, the engineer Brent tried to frame with the fake report. Ron, who had been at Crestwell longer than anyone I knew. Gloria, who kept entire departments running when systems failed. People who didn't seek credit, only dignity in their work. And now they were targets, names to be erased like they never mattered. The message didn't say who sent it, but I knew. One of his aides. Someone who had seen too much and still had a conscience. Elaine's voice echoed in my head. Pull it. And I would. I looked again at my own list, those they wanted gone. Those I was fighting for. Ron, Gloria, Claire, Julie. They had survived acquisitions, layoffs, chaos. They had taught me what loyalty really meant. At 7:06 the next morning, I logged into the proxy system, uploaded the final case file, and hit submit. No theatrics, no doubt, just clarity. Everything was there. Manipulated reports, surveillance orders, internal messages about purging veteran staff, and logs of Brent's spyware funneling data to unauthorized servers. I included the anonymous chat leak marked and verified. This wasn't revenge, it was responsibility. He'd crossed lines I couldn't ignore, and now he'd answer to more than me. But I wasn't stopping at the boardroom. I opened a secondary encrypted terminal, one Brent had insisted I create under the name CA External Sync. It was meant to distribute pre-approved talking points to select outlets untraceable by design. What he didn't know was that I'd built in a hidden override. That morning, I queued a set of sanitized documents enough to raise questions without breaking NDAs. The first release included excerpts from his restructuring plan, with sections blacked out for emphasis reset entirely. Too much legacy resistance. Flush them quietly. At 9:03 a.m., it dispatched to 5 mid-tier financial journalists. By 9:15, the first headline hit. From there, it spread like oil across a lit floor, trending on X, showing up on finance blogs, internal forums, Slack screenshots. Industry analysts dusted off old stories about Brent Aldridge's cutthroat management style. By 10:30, an internal memo urged teams not to discuss unverified claims in the media, effectively confirming them. HR went silent. Legal went dark. And Brent, he panicked. I didn't see it firsthand, but a blurry photo from the 14th floor told the story. Brent pacing, phone pressed to his ear, whiteboard covered in frantic circles and red lines. He was trying to control the spin. Too late. He had made me build the system. Now the system was speaking back on a timer in his voice from his accounts. Each hour, another scheduled release went out, logs, anonymous tips, all from the architecture he'd forced me to design. I had simply reprogrammed the origin. He couldn't cancel the transmissions. He didn't have root access. That belonged to me. The board was watching. The chief governance officer's reply to my proxy submission was brief. Motion received. Board review in progress. Effective immediately, all restructuring initiatives paused pending investigation. By noon, the pretending stopped. An R&D team leader asked if strategic redirection meant cutting older staff. A compliance officer quietly forwarded one of Brent's audit edits to legal. No one said my name. I didn't need credit, only traction. And we had it. By mid-afternoon, Brent's name disappeared from decks and meeting invites. His project stalled. This wasn't joy, it was justice, the outcome of patient architecture. At 3:22 p.m., the fifth media drop went live. Anonymous source reveals use of internal surveillance tech against veteran staff, corporate ethics review. He thought my worst move was speaking. He was wrong. My worst move was giving him exactly what he wanted, then letting it run without him. They called it a clarification meeting. In truth, it was a trial. The 18th floor conference room was bright with morning light but cold. 11 people, board members, legal counsel, strategy advisors. Brent stood at the head in a crisp navy suit voice, measured, trying to salvage his throne. He accused me of acting as a rogue agent, using privileged access to manipulate perception and damage leadership. I didn't blink. When he moved to suspend my proxy role, I opened my briefcase, pulled a plain white envelope, and slid it across the table to the board. Inside, power of proxy class B shareholder authorization appointee, Marissa Keaton. Effective date, 11 months ago. The signatures were real, the seal authentic, the QR code linking to the shareholder legal vault. She's been in control this whole time, Elaine MacArthur said quietly. Brent's face drained of color. The silence was no longer passive, it was decisive. This is absurd. She's been undermining me for months. Elaine didn't even look at him. No, Brent. She's been protecting this company from you. The chair cleared his throat. The documentation is valid. The proxy authority stands. Until evidence of misconduct is proven, Ms. Keaton retains full voting rights. Another voice added, and given the material we've reviewed, perhaps it's your role that warrants reconsideration. I sat back down not with relief, but with resolve. This wasn't over. Brent's mouth opened, then shut. His hands twitched at his sides. The man who once strutted through boardrooms now stood frozen, realizing no one was coming to save him. For 11 months, I'd worked in his shadow, enduring the jabs, ignoring the stolen credit, swallowing the erosion of my worth. Today, I didn't raise my voice or fight him on his level. I held the line, and my silence said everything. When the meeting adjourned, I nodded to the chair and walked toward the door. Brent stayed rooted to the spot. He might have been shouting as the doors closed, but I didn't look back. I didn't speak when security escorted him out. I didn't need to. Power, when it returns to its rightful hands, doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives silent, steady, final. The next morning was unnaturally quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a battle when the smoke hasn't cleared. Walking through Crestwell's glass doors felt different. People moved out of my way without being asked. His office was locked, his name scrubbed from the directory. Hours later, the board convened a closed session. Strategic shareholders who had quietly watched his misconduct pile up spoke first, citing breaches of ethics data, misuse, attempted retaliation, and misrepresentation of security protocols. Then came the offer. Effective immediately, we'd like to appoint you, Marissa Keaton, as Chief Strategy Officer. I didn't answer right away. One condition, I said. No veteran employee can be terminated without a board-reviewed justification. No more quiet cuts. A long pause, then nods. Papers signed. By 2:30 p.m., I was walking into his former office, not as a guest, not as a ghost, but as its new occupant. The air still smelled faintly of expensive cologne and false confidence. In the desk drawer, I found his plaque. I turned it over, slid it into the bottom drawer, and let it go. Logging into the primary architecture system, the one he'd tried to lock me out of the screen, blinked spy attempt neutralized. Welcome, Director Keaton. Outside, a junior engineer passed and smiled. Welcome back. I gave him a small nod. I never really left. Not every victory has fireworks. Some are quiet, some are personal, and some, like mine, are about reclaiming what was always yours.